Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today to a new accordion webinar. I am happy to introduce a new webinar about accordion, speaking about a different topic instead not as technical as the last one, but it is very interesting to show up what is going on in a new perspective. Today, Marco from HPE will give us a new insights how we can get profit of our accordion project from a business model. Marco, thank you for giving this webinar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ferran, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I apologize in advance for my voice that today is not very brilliant, so forgive me if I will have some pause. So let's move on to present. I hope you can see the slides on your screen. So today we are going to explain how the Accordion project made this investigation on what can be interesting and innovative options for modeling a business concept supporting the federation of resources shared in the edge by different providers. We will make a short recall to what the Accordion project actually is. We will define in a general level what is defined as a federation and what are the key aspects characterizing a federation. We will look at some reference model that we watched to take some inspiration for the work we have been doing in Accordion. Also, we will see which inputs and feedbacks went to this business model investigation from the technical development work that the project has been undergoing, and eventually what are the choices that were taken to define. Pardon? Okay, I go on. And finally, there will be a room for your questions and an open discussion about the points that can have raised your interest. So let's start to recalling what is the purpose and the objective of Accordion. The Accordion was coming by the observation that the new generation applications, the ones that are characterized by some distinctive pillars, like for instance, being cloud native or being composed in microservices, and also applications who pose significant challenges in terms of expected quality of the user experience from the user side. These new classes of applications emerging, better than new classes of applications, can not as easily be satisfied by the traditional legacy infrastructure models that were in the landscape, like cloud computing, for instance, traditional backend cloud computing as typically intended. But these applications need to substantially get closer to the user, even physically or better electronically closer to their users, in order to match those technical requirements, like, for instance, a low latency between the user and application response, that make up a very good quality of experience that is needed to not compromise what this kind of applications can offer. Some examples can be augmented reality applications or online gaming applications, or applications implying almost real-time interaction with users in a specific location. So Accordion has the main objective to move as close to the user as possible in the edge, not necessarily the whole applications, but those components of the applications that are more critical to define and ensure a high level of user experience. So the idea of Accordion is to utilize all the kind of infrastructure resources from compute to storage to network, or the most critical components where they can be more electronically, if not physically, closer to the end user. And to achieve this goal, we need to actually put together a number of heterogeneous providers. So this is something that cannot be 100% accommodated only by telecommunication operators, only by large public clouds, only by private clouds and on-premise clouds. But this needs to include a number of potentially even smaller resource providers, but that can ensure the presence of resources close to the user, leaving the public cloud as the place where we can allocate the parts of applications that are not as critical on this standpoint, that are not critical in terms of latency or full utilization of high bandwidth and so forth. So the technical solution of Accordion to this problem is based on a three-layer software stack. The lower part of the stack, the lower layer, what we call the mini cloud, is the layer actually in touch with the infrastructure resources, where we have a set of services that allow to deploy the application components on the physical infrastructure resources. These services include, for instance, a dedicated storage service for critical components. They include a monitoring service, include a repository to expose the available resources, a specific monitoring module for network latency measurements, and interfaces with the applications themselves to allow one-to-one interaction between the application and the platform. This is what we would call the infrastructure and infrastructure management layer. Then we have what we might consider a kind of middleware layer that we call in Accordion the continuum management framework. And if you are familiar with the network function virtualization world, this would be the orchestration layer. And in fact, we also have the Accordion orchestrator component here, along with the application lifecycle management component and other modules allowing the Accordion platform to control the physical resources made available by the provider's part of its coverage. Finally, on top, we have the application management framework that is the touch point with the Accordion customers that are typically application developers. So this is the one-stop shop point where application developers can define the structure of their application, modeling it in Tosca definition. Then they can deploy to the system, not deploy, but store into the system the software components of the application, so source code or images, containerized or virtualized virtual machine images, whatever. And they have the button, let's say, to push for triggering an actual deployment of their application into the system controlled by Accordion. So this part the mini cloud, the lower layer, is what actually is interesting for the topic that we are discussing today. Because this is the layer where a federation is created. This is the framework linking together the pool of available edge resources through these dedicated services that are instantiated individually into each mini cloud. So this is the layer part of our discussion today. In Accordion, a federation is so described by a diagram like this, where we have one continuum management framework controlling one, two, or more mini clouds. And the mini clouds should optimally provide and the maximum possible diversity to the federation in terms of certain parameters. For instance, geographical location, having available resources and nodes as sparse as possible to meet the needs of differently located users. They are, of course, differentiated by administrative domain, so they come from different providers. They can offer different technology capabilities or different implementations. They can offer different hypervisors or different containerization framework. And they can be highly differentiated in terms of computational power, because in order to meet the requirements and the objectives of Accordion, light nodes with small horsepower can be as important as nodes with the high computational power. So all of them can be part of a federation. In general, how would we define the concept of federation? Just to make an example that can be familiar to most of you, how we define a federation in the cloud domain. In the cloud, we would define a federation as an interconnection of heterogeneous clouds, public as private, where the participation to the federation is volunteer, and the goal is to make the whole system available to deliver services that are more effective in terms of cost, more power efficient, that can be more scalable, have dynamic optimization, more performant, to balance the workload between the different participants, and ultimately to enable a better customization of the services that a user can require by combining these resources from different owners. And this happens under some founding principles that are the fact that the resource provisioning and the resource accounting and billing is done on a federated base, on a collective base. There should be cross-federation mechanisms for the identity management and all the security and privacy requirements to be enforced, as well as reliable mechanisms to manage the data circulating into the federation. At the same time, the federation should be able to optimize and maximize how it can exploit the diversity of offered resources. And of course, in these cases, the adherence, the abiding to standards is an important plus, because it's far easier to have different words interoperate if all of them abide by a given standard than in the other case. In Accordion, how is the federation concept declined? There are a technical definition that we give and a business side definition. Technically speaking, the federation in Accordion is a set of mini clouds under the control of a unique accordion orchestration layer, what we saw before as continuum management framework. In terms of business, we defined it that the association of a number of resource providers that will to share the resources under a common accordion umbrella that is also a technical umbrella, meaning that in the most general case, some resource providers can federate without sharing any technical component. Each of them can use its fully free choice of software and hardware components, and they just open the ports of their infrastructure to the federation to enable it to use its own resources. In the case of Accordion, there is one step more to accomplish because we require that the federated mini clouds install and run a set of Accordion services of components provided by Accordion to enable a unique, easier, and more efficient control level from the Accordion platform to the federation. So if I, as a provider, decide to share my resources with other federated peers, of course, I expect something in return that is normally a financial payback in terms of more revenues or an expansion of my business. So to create a federation, we need to establish a set of rules and policies regulating how the federation works, and also to define some incentives for the participation to invite as many peers as possible to join the federation. The first step typically in defining a federated environment is to define the roles of this federation. So in the Accordion context, we have 4 general roles, 2 on the provider side and 2 on the Accordion side. On the provider side, we have, generally speaking, the application provider role that can be considered the ultimate customer of the federation and is the one who needs to have available resources for the optimal deployment of its application and for delivering the needed quality of services to its own customers and users. There is also a service provider role that is actually the operational customer of the federation. That can be, and in many cases is, the application provider itself, but it can be for the application provider a third party that is in charge of the operational delivery of the service built around the application. So in general, theoretically, these are 2 distinct roles. On the Accordion side, we have the mini cloud owner that is the entity owning the resources that he decides to share inside the federation. So he isn't the active federation member. And we have the role of federation owner that can be considered the founding federation member, but it can also be the Accordion platform entity, and we will see in short what it means in terms of centralized federation. These roles have a more significant distinction at technical level because the functions that each of these plays in the accordion architecture can be differentiated. At business level, it's very easy that these roles can merge, that an application provider and a service provider can be the same, and that the federation owner can be also one of the federated mini clouds. So let's have a look at the aspects that in general characterize a federation. First one is the governance. Governance meaning which are the policies and the rules ensuring that the federation is correctly and thoroughly working in its day-by-day activity. Rules that the more are flexible, the better, because they allow to extend the capabilities of the federation and to not constrain it into tight rules wherever this is possible. For instance, having differentiated trust levels in case of not fully open federation, and ultimately to ensure that the federation is sustainable on a business standpoint. So governance means to configure the business relationship among the federated members and the business agreements that are acting among the members themselves. These rules and agreements have to rule out how the federation members cooperate, what is the macro level of management, how is defined and working, what are the shared business models, and how a member can join the federation or leave the federation. As said, in accordion, we have some technical requirements, but in general, the federated peers should have some common language to speak. For instance, if they share resources, these resources should have a common recognized semantic description. There should be shared rules for the charging these resources to the federation and to the federation customers, and also on how to handle shared service level agreements. The management of the federation can be centralized or distributed. We will come back to this in a moment. As said, accordion asks to its federated peers to install and run certain software components that are made available by the project platform. In case of closed federation, we will see what it means in 1 second. The links behind the governance model are typically tighter because the federated members in this case decide to share more and also to be more prescriptive in terms of rules governing the federation itself. Second point is the admittance. Which are the rules specifying how I can join a federation and also how I can leave a federation? And in terms of this parameter, the federation can be open or closed with certain degrees of gray in between the two extremes. But basically, an open federation is the one that does not have strong or structured admittance procedure, excluding the technical preconditions. I have to install and run the accordion software, mini cloud software, but there are not business restrictions to every resource provider joining a federation. A closed federation is a federation where there are instead some entrance rules, and typically this is because there is a higher level of sharing, not just pure resource exposure, but something more. In some cases, more delegation of power to the centralized controlling entity or to the entity acting case by case as the end user contact point. So in general, a closed federation has procedures to appraise if an entrant provider has all the conformity required to be part of that federation. Third aspect, the coordination. The coordination means the kind of mechanism how a federation handles the moment when a customer requests to run an application and to allocate resources. Actually, the request is mediated by the orchestration layer, but this is just a detail. So this mechanism includes, in general, 3 steps that are step of resource discovery, find where and which resources are available, a step of negotiation with the specific resource owners, and finally, a step of operational allocation when the orchestrator actually triggers a deployment of the application components into the chosen resources. There are a couple of differentiating factors. First one is if the control of this coordination is centralized or distributed. Centralized means it is coordinated by a peer or a third-party broker, and more technically, this means that we have one overarching orchestrator who is enabled to control all the federated mini clouds under its coverage. In case of distributed control, we have typically one of the peers that acts as an entry point for the deployment request, and then the request is cascaded among the peers, and these in general can encompass that a local orchestration component is also present in the different infrastructure entities in what we call the mini clouds. It's not an absolute rule, but in general, it's like this. Another differentiating element is the initiation mode that can be push or pull. What does it mean? A pull initiation mode means that I, as federated mini cloud, I'm substantially passive in advertising my offer. I expose in real time, more or less, what resources I can or won't make available to the federation. That's it. In a push model, the federated member is more proactive because it can expose more than just the mere resource availability, but also can push some economical offerings or be more active in general in exposing competitive information concerning the availability of its resources. The operational phases involved by the coordination are substantially 2. Publishing phase, that is just a phase of exposure of the resources and sharing of meta information about the resources, and the orchestration phase when there is the actual deployment and allocation of applications to the selected resources. So when we started this task in Accordion, dedicated task within one of the Accordion work packages, we tried to seek available reference models for similar cases of federation that we might use as the starting point to not fully reinvent the wheel. The one that we found closer to the accordion objectives and to the accordion context is the 5G EX project. This is a Horizon 2020 project who ran between 2015 and 2018. It is a project coming from the 5G domain, namely from the network function virtualization domain. And this project realized a multi-domain NFV orchestration framework that is not exactly the same that Accordion is pursuing, but has some logical links with Accordion. 5GX defined what it called 5G communities based on a co-competitive service model, meaning that the participants to a 5G community are competitors and continue to be competitors on the service market, but for certain services or certain particular context, they decide to cooperate with their own competitors. And for the services catalog related to their federated offering, they basically accept to not be competing, but only cooperating in that specific context. Typically, the members of a 5G community are telecommunication operators, and the customer of this kind of federation was an enterprise wholesale reseller of services. So a wholesale service reseller looking to proper allocation of NFV resources for more vertical services offered to its own customers. We had use cases encompassing multimedia or plain infrastructure services. So what were the choices done by 5GX? 5GX went for a no brokering model, a fully distributed model, a fully peer-to-peer model. During the project lifetime, we had more interactions with the stakeholder ecosystem, but also many big operators were part of the project. And at the time, in the telecommunication world, there was no good attitude towards an external third-party brokering entity managing this set of federated services. Also, telecommunication operators typically have already in place a strong OSS BSS layer, so they have all the facilities needed to manage customer interaction. They not particularly need to have this done by a third-party entity. So in the 5GX Federation, each member is a potential entry point to the federation. Each member has its own customer, and its customers use itself as an entry point to the federated services that are substantially transparent to the end user. Case by case, the federation member acting as entry point has the commitment to find the best possible resource allocation and to contract the best possible service level agreement for this incoming request based on a catalog of predefined services between the federation, but through a cascading process, he is looking for the most appropriate resources. And finally, when the whole collection of resources is combined, it is pushed up to overarching orchestrating layer for the provisioning and the triggering of the whole service lifecycle management. The federation member in 5GX could even choose to be just pure resource suppliers, not even hosting the federation catalog. So they had the option to not be potential entry points. In this case, what they said was, okay, my peers are also my service entry points. I rely upon you for searching and looking for my resources. And the advantage in this case is they did not need to deploy the business layer of the 5GX software stack that otherwise had to be deployed into the premises of the federated members, because here, being this a fully peer-to-peer model, certain business level operations need to be within the federation members. 5GX was the main reference that we took for Accordion, but we also explored the other potential reference models. We just have a quick overview here of what we looked at. We looked at cloud computing federations of cloud providers that exist, not only in the research domain, but also in the reality in the market, federations like Cloud 28 Plus. That are typically classified on a certain number of parameters. Are they hierarchical or not? Do they have a centralized brokering and management, or are they fully peer-to-peer? Do they provide highly heterogeneous resource types? Do they have different infrastructure as service stacks or not? And do they have capabilities that are unique to the federation and go beyond the capabilities of each single member? A second case that we analyzed was the ETSI MEC. That is an architecture where encompassing a model of federation among participants. There is a very interesting study of inter-MEC and cloud MEC system coordination, and a study on multi-operator agreements in special verticalized on V2X services. And MEC defined what they call a MAC federator component, that is substantially the joining of a federation manager and of a federation broker to architectural layers that are more distinct in the MEC model than what they are in Accordion typically. Finally, we looked at Gaia-X. Gaia-X is less close to Accordion because, as probably most of you know, Gaia-X is a data space specific initiative, and it is about federating data spaces, data sources. And anyhow, we wanted to also have a look at how Gaia-X choose to go in terms of federation pillars. Gaia-X is a fully distributed, fully decentralized federation model based on trust. And it offers some federated services that are implemented at a federated level, is concerning federated identity management, interoperability among different data spaces, so things like a common vocabulary, assurance of sovereign data exchange, and assurance of compliance. These are the main elements characterizing a Gaia-X defined federation. All in all, after this analysis, we concluded that the 5GX model might be the one closer to accordion, but we also realized during the technical development that we might not really replicate the choices and the decisions of 5GX. And now I show you what were the learnings that we took during the technical development of accordion. So one of the first points that we analyzed was the administrative nature of mini cloud, because in theory and in general, you might have mini clouds defined in accordion as granular atomic mini clouds, where there are altogether resources coming from different providers. Or on the other hand, you can associate one-to-one a mini cloud to an administrative domain. So have a single provider mini clouds. Both options on a general standpoint can be explored. In the end, Accordion chose to go for a single provider mini cloud configuration because this really strongly simplifies the federation governance that is much more challenging in case of multi-provider mini clouds. And anyhow, it's not impossible, at least in general, to have multi-provider services if you have a centralized broker that can combine together components of applications and have them run in different administrative domains. So Accordion decided for implementation reasons, as you know, a research project has a timeline, has given deliverables to provide in a given time, and our evaluation was that single provider mini clouds could fully accomplish the key accordion objectives, removing some overhead that was not deemed as essential. One point about mini clouds is also that metering services must run at the federated level, and this also means in the end that you have to share some part of the operation service support or business service support layers. Complications that, especially in a strongly edge-oriented system like Accordion, would have very likely represented more overhead than added value. And 5GX instead implemented this, but the objective of 5GX since the beginning were to have that specific kind of services and of service delivery. So how we instantiate a mini cloud in Accordion? It is quite simple. We only have to get a few parameters from the federation, parameters that are essentially a unique mini cloud ID that is needed by the Accordion platform to identify that mini cloud during the operation, and the IP address of my endpoint connection to the federation. Once I have these two simple parameters that of course I have to get offline before materially joining, I can download and install, and my premise is the mini cloud software stack. At that point, I am substantially part of the federation. There is a handshaking mechanism and components especially dedicated to ensure the constant connection between the Accordion platform and the mini clouds. No more procedures, no more processes, an implicit acceptance of business policies and rules wherever the federation has dictated them and prescribed them. In terms of aggregation model, Accordion went for a centralized broker-based architecture, and in this aspect, it is different from 5GX. But the reasons, as we already said, is simplification and the different kind of participants to the federation, because Accordion is targeting at a very important level small and medium providers, providers that can have resources on the edge, more distributed, but with a lighter footprint, with less horsepower. And for these participants, having a fully peer-to-peer aggregation model means having them to install and run additional software for participating to the management of the federation. So we wanted our federation members to get rid of this overhead, and we decided to go for a broker-based architecture. The broker is basically mapped to what we saw to be the continuum management framework of Accordion. It technically maps to that layer. On a business standpoint, it can be internal, so it is also a federation peer, perhaps a bigger peer than the others, but it also can be an external broker that has a compensation agreement based on a share of revenues that the federation can trigger. In terms of resource allocation, we have a component in the mini-cloud software that is devoted to resolve this point. It's named RID, Resource Indexing and Discovery, and is actually, as the name suggests, a repository of the resources that at any given moment a mini-cloud wants to make available for the federation to run services coming from the federation. It is distributed, so we have one of these repository in every mini-cloud, and then the information from this RID component are pushed up to the orchestration layer that uses them to decide where a given application should be allocated and provisioned. So the federated providers fully delegate decisions about resource allocation to the orchestration slash brokering entity. And these allocations are not supposed to be negotiable, meaning them the moment I expose some resources to the federation, I am committing to make them available. So if you remember a few slides back, we said that the process was done by 3 different steps. The intermediate step was a negotiation phase that is not present in Accordion. There is just the resource discovery and the resource allocation phases. So I try to recap without being too bothering what are the characteristics that have been associated to the Accordion Federation and the ones that we will propose at the conclusion of this investigation and the conclusion of the whole project that is coming in a little more than 2 months now. We went for some simplified choices to better comply with the technical requirements and the technical constraints that we had, but at the same time without sacrificing any of the key objectives under Accordion. So we went for a single provider mini cloud to remove all the technical and business complexities and get rid for the federation members of not irrelevant part of overhead. We went for a brokered federation model that is a direct consequence of choosing to have single provider mini clouds. And even in this case, support especially the small and medium enterprise members to prevent management overhead. We went for an offline onboarding policy. What does it mean? This means that we do not have automated machine-to-machine business contract negotiations. This is something that might be interesting to investigate in the future for future projects or business follow-ups. For instance, to understand if blockchain platform might be used to automatically create smart contracts to handle the entrance into a federation or the acceptance of a specific service request. In case of Accordion, this was substantially out of scope and not needed given the simplified structure that we have for the technical implementation. So the business agreement is supposed to be negotiated offline prior to the actual joining of a member to the federation that comes with the installation of the mini cloud software, as we have seen. The broker is in charge of deploying all the central components of the platform, the application management, the continuum management framework, and the application management framework. And then once we have the first member, we are basically incepting this new Accordion federation. We have not talked about financial aspects, pricing and revenue sharing. We will have something on this in the next few minutes, but I anticipate that these aspects were deferred to follow-up projects because they were too far beyond for the Accordion scope, and also considering Accordion is a research and innovation action, this would be perfect probably for follow-up innovation action, for instance. In terms of resource reallocation, allocation and reallocation, because of course in Accordion we have a life cycle management that can decide at any moment in order to keep the target quality of user experience to change the allocation of certain application components, moving them not only within a mini cloud, that is something the mini cloud itself can autonomously accomplish, but only from a mini cloud to another mini cloud. As we said, these decisions are fully delegated to the brokering entity, that is the orchestration and lifecycle management layer, based on the monitoring, observation, elaboration of the technical metrics that the system can control, and to the enforcement of the KPIs that have to be enforced. If a member wants to withdraw from an Accordion federation, this is not an automated operation again, like the entrance. Should be negotiated offline, but in general, there are no constraints as for the admittance, apart from ensuring that no running service is wrecked avoc because a federation member is leaving the federation. So first, all the services running on resources of this member have either to be decommissioned or to be migrated by the broker to another mini cloud. And of course, this also encompasses the full removal of the mini cloud software from the former member infrastructure. We said that accordion federations are open, no constraints to enter. Typically, we target medium or even low scale members, offering them lower business and technical complexity. And at the same time, we have an explicit ambition as project to enlarge the participation, to extend the scope of available services on the market, and following that paradigm, saying that more than backend very large infrastructures, you need a far bigger number of medium, even small infrastructures available on the edge to better serve the diversity, geographical diversity and requirement diversity of the audience of potential accordion users. And in the future, of course, nothing prevents the system to become closer. For instance, to have member scoring mechanisms to understand if any member should be warned or in extreme cases ejected by the federation, but this is not in accordion scope. The coordination model, as said, is fully centralized, and the governance model is competitive, meaning that we are not supposed to make direct business competition for the services that we deliver as a federation. The governance is quite loose. There are not no extremely tight policies have been defined, and another point, the resource allocation algorithm running in the orchestration layer is not substantially looking at financial parameters. So cost functions do not include financial element evaluation when deciding how to allocate. Just to complete this exposition, a few words about the financial aspects. As we said, Accordion deferred a deeper investigation on the revenue sharing and service pricing models. And COVID also played a role in this decision, because the 2 and more years that Accordion had to spend under the COVID restrictions meant that we had a drastic slowdown of the interaction with our ecosystem stakeholders. And these aspects need to be seriously defined, even from the 5GX experience, to have a strong interaction with the potential stakeholders, something that was hindered in our project. So we decided to not produce too general conclusions that would not have been really significant, but to defer this aspect to a follow-up of Accordion, perhaps more oriented towards an engineering and something going closer to an actual production landscape. Of course, whatever financial scheme would be tied to a brokered model. So we would have to set up a pricing for the resources that are shared with the federation, and also the compensation scheme for the third-party broker especially when it is not itself a federation member. Anyhow, there are some enabling elements in Accordion yet, because the mini clouds have a monitoring component that enables the metering of resources that is a prerequisite to any accounting and pricing mechanism. So follow-up initiatives, future projects have the ingredients to build up a proper service level agreement enforcement mechanisms supporting the business agreements. We did not make a numerical analysis, but we made a qualitative analysis of the advantages that joining an accordion federation can bring to its members. And an important point, I think, is that these advantages are add-ons to standard business. To be more clear, accordion does not impose substantially any cost of sale. Whatever you have to do is to install a light piece of software, because the MiniCloud software has a light blueprint. It's not taking itself resources off the availability of applications. The installation is simple enough. We have a unique integrated installer for all the components of the MiniCloud. And joining a federation, that is a learning we also took from 5GX, is a strong chance to employ your unused resources, because it's well known, even from energy efficiency studies of data centers, that typically the used resources are very, very much below the full available capacity of a computational or storage or networking nodes. So a federation gives the chance to employ resources that are anyhow a cost, because they are a cost, but they don't bring a profit in return. Sharing them with the federation can provide this marginal profit on top of your usual revenue. At the same time, you keep control on the resources that you want to share, because you can decide to change at any moment the exposure of resources to the federation. So if at a certain moment for some time you no longer want to commit resources to federation, you can do it by just changing some information on the resource and indexing discovery module. We target the segment of applications exploiting the edge, applications with the demanding quality of user experience. And this can be difficult to do if you are sometimes a standalone provider. It can be easier to do with a federation. Ultimately, your addressable market as a provider can be extended through this resource sharing opportunity. And the profitability of a federation is linearly, not linearly necessarily, but for sure it grows with the number of federated members, especially in a system like accordion, where scaling up does not mean creating an issue of management scaling. And you can enable the delivery of bigger services. You can promote the differentiation of services, for instance, delivering premium class services versus standard services, better than you can do alone. So to conclude and leave some room to your questions, Accordion developed this technical innovation, a platform serving new generation applications, offering them a provisioning that is strongly oriented to keep a high quality of experience through the Federation of Distributed Edge Providers. The project performed this investigation on the business aspects and implications falling off its federation model. We could assess the requirements and the constraints that impacted our technical implementation. And this investigation eventually converged to define some federation characteristics compatible with the technical landscape of the project, but at the same time, leaving the door open to extend it in future projects or initiatives. And more complex aspects, in particular the financial aspects, were sidelined and left to follow up. I thank you for your attention and apologize if I were a bit too long. And now I leave room to your questions or observations, whatever you like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. It was a pleasure to listen all what you present and also all the details that you give you, the correlations and with other projects. And I think it's a very good introduction what you did and all the work has been done in Accordion in terms of the business federation and business model that we have in Accordion. Let's see if anybody of the audience has any question. If not, let me make you a quick question about, because as you mentioned, everything is centralized because now, but as the current techniques that we have in the new trend that we have in the centralized web or Web3, how do you think we will fit Accordion in this kind of new technologies? Because at the end, you have peer-to-peer communication, that what basically at the end is what we have, but they invent the tokens and also how to monetize and give a value when you're offering some kind of edge resources or computational resources, because it's something that nobody did it before.
Yes, thanks for this question, Ferran. Let's say that the choice to go for a centralized model is a facilitation, because at the moment, as you said, Accordion is a kind of pioneer in this arena. At the moment, there are not so many examples of very distributed resource federations. And as I said, we wanted in the end to not make too complex, on one hand, the technical implementation of the project, because when you are a pioneer, it's very important that you come up with the first prototype that presents and demonstrates the essential capabilities of the system, leaving other capabilities for future extensions. But at the same time, what we designed as architecture does not close the door to a peer-to-peer implementation. And I mentioned the blockchain, for instance, that could be an enabling technology to facilitate fully peer-to-peer modeling, and also the strengthening of computational capabilities that are going to the edge, the spreading of edge data centers that are getting closer to the computational power that you today can only find in the backend. All these can bring the Accordion idea, the Accordion reference architecture towards a peer-to-peer model, and it is not incompatible with that. It's just that we did not implement those business layer components that should have been installed into each mini cloud in order to make it more autonomous and supportive of a fully peer-to-peer cascading model, as it was in 5GX. But 5GX started from that objective from the beginning, and the federation members in 5GX are typically larger telecommunication operators. Telefonica is one of them. Telefonica also was part of IGX. So to them, having a BSS OSS layer, having a CRM infrastructure, customer endpoint infrastructure was already something present. So to them, it was much easier to support a fully peer-to-peer model. In Accordion, we did like this to go towards our main addressed target, at least the providers that we want to help to enter more and more into this market and to extend more and more this market because, and I conclude, because the applications that are in the scope of Accordion, virtual reality, online gaming, and like that, the likes of that, are more niche applications, whereas NFV services are typically more bulky services, infrastructure as a service kind of capabilities that are more close to the demand also more horsepower from the provider side. So we tried to fit what was actually the segment where we wanted to have more impact, but technically it's feasible to expand Accordion and move it to a fully peer-to-peer model.
Thank you very much, Marco. I think Costas also has a question. And Emanuele, no, Emanuele or Costas, now it's like, okay, Emanuele, it's your turn. Think.
Okay, yes, if Costas, if you want to be first, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. I wasn't. I had raised the hand, but I wasn't sure it was raised, so I was clicking it, toggling it on and off.
Okay,
so
okay.
Go ahead. I'll go next.
Right. Yes. To avoid any potential, conflict of interest, being this talk mostly about Accordion, I would do a question that is kind of, is kind of a vision, and is more or less connected with what you were saying as the last point, that usually, the usage of cloud systems were about batch processing, right? Here instead we have maybe something lighter, but that introduce another actor, which is the final user, that is the one that is not paying for the resources, right? So my question is related to the fact that how do you see also the user put into the financial mix, in the sense that perhaps if having the resources and the services at the edge would be beneficial, maybe also the user would like to, not would like, but would participate to, to the equation in the revenue. So here we have three actors. We have essentially both the service provider and the user that pays, and then the federation that organize the resources and take care of the payment. Do you see this something like that is going to be in the future, or you see big barrier for this kind of model?
Thanks for this question, Emanuele. It's very, very interesting, and it also brings me back to some work that was done in 5GX about this point, although the targeted users are different among the two. Well, I think that generally speaking, Accordion is a platform conceived to serve the service providers or the application vendors in case the two roles are the same. So the mechanism inner to Accordion can help to price and to perform the accounting and billing of the usage of infrastructure resources on the edge, not in the cloud, but they can meter the consumption of resources in the infrastructure, then I think there is another layer that is the application side. And these, in my own vision, that can be completely wrong, but is still very much on the specific application vendor or service provider that knows how it wants to sell its application or its services to end users, and knows what can be the cost for him to run its service on Accordion Federation, and makes its own financial evaluation. I see the two still as separate. In the end, the Accordion Federation can expose a catalog of resources, of packages of resources, if we want to go towards a more structured catalog. I still see a separation among the two, and management of the end user side more on the specific service provider. Of course, this is my own feeling, and the market might go into another direction. But I still see some mediation between the infrastructure service delivery platform like Accordion and the very, very end user.
I see. Thank you very much for the answer. Please, Ferran.
Well, I think now it's time to Costas.
Yes. Hi. Thanks. So thank you, Marco, for this very interesting presentation. The question I have is that, is there any way to estimate the costs for developing the components that are needed to cover these business aspects, at least some of those that you mentioned? Is there any way to say that, I don't know, it needs one more project, or it needs substantial investments from I don't know, from whatever organizations?
Thanks, Costas, for this question. Well, my simplest answer would probably be that an innovation action, catching what Accordion is going to release in a couple of months from now, and trying to build up those more business-oriented services or technical components, but oriented to make the whole system closer to a real market scenario, might be the good way to go. So yes, I think there is the need for a project. These are not simple extensions, because they are going to touch aspects that either you leave them very tailored to the single participant situation and needs, and then it's difficult to create a generalized framework, a generalized set of components, or you want to create something more universal, and that encompasses some work in terms of definition of vocabulary, design, attachment to what are typically in data centers, the OSS and BSS layers that are not standardized. They are typically vendor dependent. So it is something that requires some effort, can be done, but if you do this effort, you do it because the concept that Accordion generated has a high potential value for the market expansion. So it's a research and innovation effort that, in my opinion, is very worth doing. A clear estimation of cost, I'm not honestly able to provide it, but in the range of small, medium innovation action might be an answer.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thanks. Interesting.
Okay, now we will have the last question because I I promise Marco to don't stress you so much, but
I've been fine so far. Thanks
okay, thank you.
thanks to God.
Lorenzo, it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco, for your great presentation. Yes, so in your presentation, you mentioned a federation business agreement. So something like, I guess, a contract between a provider and the federation. Is there any template for that? And also, let's say, do you think that Accordion project should provide such a template?
Well, thanks, Lorenzo, for this question. We have not a template of these. There are probably examples that can be taken. If I'm not wrong in remembering, not even 5GEX came out with what we might call a template of a business agreement, just set out some rules, made some deeper investigation on the economical side, but I don't remember that even that project came out with a specific template to offer. We might start from any, for instance, service level agreement template regulating service delivery, even in different federations. The key points would be the ones that we saw during the webinar, so all those aspects of compliance, of service assurance, penalties, also tighter rules for sharing more detailed information, delegation or not of allocation power to the brokering entity if we have a brokering entity. So I don't know if in the time left to Accordion we can be able to come up with this, but I think and I hope that with the investigation work that we did and presented today, we laid out all the elements to turn them into something that can be more formalized.
Okay, thank you, Marco.
Thank you very much. I think thank you very much, Marco, because you did a fantastic presentation and also answering all the questions that we had. And I think it's time to conclude. And thank you for joining this webinar. And hopefully, I will see you on March about some technical work on AI for fault tolerance and resilience mechanisms. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Ferran. Thanks, everybody, for joining today.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye to all.
Goodbye.